for coming to tonight's program. I just want to point out that the bathrooms, closest bathrooms are right outside and make a sharp right.
I'll be right back.
Also, there are emergency exits at the rear on either side. There are also
I'll be right back.
2 flights of stairs out these doors. And I just wanted to, I don't think any of you are friends of the library, but in case you are, and even if you're not, I wanted to acknowledge that our Friends of the Library support group made this program possible through their generous support. And I want to welcome our speakers, first in the very colorful shirt that he tells me his children are very fond of, is Jordan B. Gorfinkel. I think we could take a quick poll since there's such a small group. Has anybody come from farther away than Ohio for tonight's program? Then you
Ohio Street. Right, by
You came from
45.
Ohio?
Yeah, just you. You're welcome.
So I think he's the one who came the farthest for tonight's program. And
We
thank you
appreciate
for
it.
coming. Yes, we do. And then next we have is Butch Hartman,
Thank you.
the creator of the Fairly Odd Parents of
Fairly Odd,
Nickelodeon.
yes.
That's a documentary, right?
No, it's an animation. Well, it could be a documentary. If it was about a little boy with fairies, yes, it would be a documentary. No, it's an animated cartoon. It's been out for 16 years. Straight, yeah, 16 years.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Still new episodes?
Still new episodes, yeah. I think we're just ending it now. They're kind of phasing it out now, but it's been going for 16 years straight. So we're very proud of it.
So we're delighted to welcome you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You guys can applaud if you want.
Please don't stop. Please don't stop.
Well, this is my good friend Jordan. You can call him Gorf. We call him Gorf for short.
Which is frog backwards, so that you won't forget it. You call it word for frog. What's Butch backwards?
I know, it's totally. It's very odd.
I'm like Zatanna, you know, it's magic backwards words.
No one gets that reference at all.
That's all right.
You get that? You do?
Thank
You get it too? Three? Okay, half the audience got that.
See, you doubt me.
She's the only magician with fishnets.
Right.
Yeah, she wears the fishnets. We met a couple years ago at the Stan Lee Comic Con.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, we did a panel together, and then Gorf, as always, instead of just letting someone go, was, hey, can you help me with something? And so we ended up coming up with this comic book here that you see, and it's called the 3 O'Clock Club. You want to talk about what the 3 O'Clock Club is?
Yes, 3 O'Clock Club is about a group of teenagers at a regular high school who every day form a secret club to combat an amazing problem. See, there's a portal, which you can see right above at the top underneath the logo over there. There's a portal that opens up at 3 o'clock, the end of every school day. And out of that portal come all kinds of monsters and crazy things and chaos that are the representation of the fears of the students at the school. And their job is to put all that craziness back in the portal by 4 o'clock to reset the clock so that everything will be normal until the next day when it happens all over again.
And there's 5 of them in the club, and once it's all reset, nobody, like right now, when that dinosaur coming out, the whole school will see it, they'll freak out, they'll run, but once they reset it, nobody remembers it except for the kids in the club, because they have these special badges that they wear. But the cool thing about the 3 O'Clock Club, that's not the only club. The club has been in existence for like 300 years. Because you see the guy way in the back up there.
Spoiler alert.
We're not going to say anything, but he is the reason the entire thing exists in the first place. And so he forms in the club every couple of years as the kids age, and he doesn't. So yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty intriguing. So
And if you want, we have the opening couple 3 pages that we can read to you, which we thought would be fun. After all, Butch is, and this is one of the most interesting things that we thought we'd talk about.
that's my wife. That's my wife. Just get rid of
And
that.
the JFK assassination files have been released. That's going to be our next series.
Almost lifelike.
Okay, there we go. There we go.
Maxine, can you switch to the laptop? We'll do a
Yeah,
I'm going to go to settings and put non-auto lock.
that's fine. Maxine, who is our amazing tech guy over here, is going to switch us to the laptop so that we can get that comic book up. But what I was going to say is, Butch comes from an animation background, and I come from a comic book background. And one of the most fascinating parts of this partnership was merging, gelling the 2 sensibilities together. Because when you have animation, right?
He's Jewish and I know, so that.
There's that too.
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
Right, and by the way, I like that the default position is Jewish. That was very good, right?
This is Beverly.
Well, this is Beverly Hills.
Hey, I'm the minority here, guys.
Right, well, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Don't worry, no pogroms over here, no
What time do I get out of
crusades.
here? What time do I get
So, right, actually, it's dark outside already, so we're.
You're trapped.
It's too late, yes, we're not going anywhere for 24 hours, sorry. Anyway, so in animation, when you're trying to, not to speak for the expert over here, when you're trying to get some kind of an action to be portrayed, then it's simple. You just say the character walks across the room, lifts the chair, trips, falls, and continues on his way. In a comic book, you have to find the high point of every individual action, like storyboards, and you have to communicate all of those in-between moments with just a few select actions. So you would say, guy enters room, guy picks up chair, guy trips, a little bit of dialogue, walks on his way. And they could take one entire page to tell what in 3 or 5 seconds you can do an animation. That's kind of boring. So how do you then tell a story that spans a good deal of time? I think our first story takes place in, well, an hour, right?
Yeah.
How do you condense an hour into 22 pages of about 6 or 7 individual storyboards or panels?
And the fun thing is I write as well. I write scripts all the time. I write actual scripts like movie scripts and TV scripts and things like that. And when I was working with Gorf on this, I would just write the way I wrote. You know, dialogue, action, dialogue. And he would take it and refine it into comic book speak. And he would make my lengthy descriptions turn into comic book panels, which I thought was a really fun exercise. And it took a long time to get this thing going, too. We went through a lot of iterations. Our first person we sold the comic book to ended up leaving the company. He worked with us for a long time. He ended up getting a better job and that. But then these other editors took over. They were just dynamite. They were great for us. But it really took about, 2 years to get this thing done?
I don't remember. You know, working with you, it only felt like a year and 3/4.
That's what I thought. That's the right answer. That's the right answer. But
the name of the company, by the way, is Lion Forge Comics, and it's a fascinating company. It's a homegrown company out of St. Louis, and they are a wholly African-American owned company. So they, and their whole raison d'etre is to tell stories about diversity. A lot of superhero stuff, but a lot of other stuff as well, so I urge you to check it out. But of course, first 3 o'clock club, and then you can use that as your opening to the rest of the company's offerings.
Does anyone have any questions about the comic book process at all? You guys can jump up with questions anytime you want, or anything about storytelling. Because the main thing about comic books or animation or movies or TV or anything that we do, that anybody here might do, it's all about storytelling. Everything we do is telling a story. Whether I do it through a cartoon, or whether he does it through a comic book, or we do it through a script. We all love great stories, and the only way to get a great story is to get great characters in the story. Yeah, yes sir.
So, Gorf, I think I've seen your stuff, like you do the comic strips and they're political type oriented. I don't know if like that's a thing, but do you kind of like do it all, or is that a thing where you think like, well, how do I morph that into like a real comic book, or how do I, I don't know what you're...
Sure, so I guess the best way to answer that is to give you a little background, and then we'll give Butch an opportunity to give his background as well. I started as a, well, how do I say this politely, an overweight, sedentary kid who watched a lot of television. And
that was really polite.
Yeah. And along the way, I decided that, you know what? This is what I want to do as a career. I want to watch TV, and I want to make up stories, and I want to be able to eat whatever I want to eat, and that's what I want to do. So what's my path? How do I do this? So of course, the way to do it is you go to your mom and say, bring me to the comic book store every week, and buy me lots and lots of comic books. So that's what I did for many, many years. And then I tried avoiding my true destiny by doing all kinds of other stuff. People wanted me to be a lawyer, they wanted me to be an accountant, all the things that a nice Jewish mom would be proud that her son would do as a career. So one day, I was directing cable access television. Remember that? Wayne's World and all of that? So I lived in New York City, and a whole bunch of us would just scramble into a Pinto, like 7 of us, in a car that's about this big, for those of you who don't know.
Pinto's a car.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Right. And by the way, we had drivers back then, it wasn't self-driving.
Yeah, you had to drive your own car.
Exactly. And long story short, I was the director of this Wayne's World-like show, and one of my camera people worked at DC Comics. And I went fanboy all over her. Oh my gosh, this is what I'm going to do. How do I do this? Where do I go? What do I do? So she said, well, it's simple. They have an internship program. I was in college. I was in art school at the time. And you can just write a letter and get an internship. Fantastic. So what do? Write a bunch of letters. And I send them into people on the masthead of the comics, Bob Rozakis and Dick Giordano and everybody else, to try to get an internship. And one day I come back from temping in New York City.
This is before the internet, the right things.
You had right, yes. And you even had, and that's a good segue, because I even had a tape recorder answering machine at the time. So get home, I have the tape recorder answering machine, hello, welcome. And there's a message on it, hey, this is Bob Rozakis from DC Comics. Come on down. So excited. So I go downtown, and I'm wearing my nicest flannel shirt at that time.
Did you have that shirt on?
Yeah, I did. Because it's bright colors, it's very consistent. And I'm walking into 1325 6th Avenue or whatever street it was, and I'm going up the elevator, I'm looking to my right, and I'm thinking this guy must be Butch Hartman, the famous animator. I'm looking to my left, this must be Neil Adams, the amazing artist. And I learned later on that was the guy who had the photostat machine. It's the guy, But those people are very important also. So I go upstairs, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm called in, and I finally led into Bob Rozakis' office. And he's got this huge oak table in front of me. He's an oak of a man, big guy, big table, real publisher, like everything that you'd imagine in Central Castle.
Lou Grant.
Exactly, Lou Grant. Right, Harry White. Right.
Trust me, Alex.
Right. But by the way, publishing is when you take the internet and you put it on paper.
That's
Right. Poor Mary over here.
She's like, what's paper?
Right.
It's stuff that we got. Go ahead.
Yeah. So he doesn't say a word. He just sits behind his desk and he opens up a drawer, takes a piece of paper out, the aforementioned paper, slams it on the desk, picks up another piece of paper, slams it on the desk. Does that like 8 times. And then he hands me the sheet of paper. And I look at it, and it's all of my resumes. And he says, "Kid, you got the job. Just stop sending resumes." And that's how I got into comics. So to answer your question, from there, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this also. It's really just imbibing the atmosphere. And when you're around the medium, I didn't pick up a pen to draw for probably 4 or 5 years. When I got the opportunity to begin JewishCartoon.com, plug, JewishCartoon.com, I realized, from being around all these amazing artists and writers, I'm able to do this now. And then from there, it became, okay, so then how do we turn this stuff into television shows or animation and all that sort of stuff? And Butch, tell us about your experience.
I'm so enthralled by your story. I can't help it. I felt like I was there. Hi guys, everybody. My name is Butch Hartman, and I am, like Gorf, a child of the world before the internet was here. And I grew up in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, and I loved TV myself. When I was a kid, all my friends were outside playing baseball and doing, fun things boys would do, and I would just sit in the house and watch TV. I love black and white TV. I had to get up like this and actually turn the channel. And you had to be done. You would just sit there and you would be happy with what you were watching, But through TV, when I was in Michigan, I would see all
Thank
this.
you for being here.
We keep teasing her. When I was in Michigan, I would sit there in Michigan, and it snows 8 months out of the year in Michigan. So I'd be sitting in the snow, looking at this television screen, watching Adam 12, and seeing these cops where there's palm trees and it was warm. And I'm like, well, where is that? I want to go there. And I realized there was this place called California. So anyway, as a kid, I loved to draw. I still love to draw. Drawings are right here in this bag right here. But I wanted to draw, and I never realized I could make a living being an artist. And I decided at age 15 I wanted to work for Walt Disney. And I wanted to go to this magical school called Cal Arts. And the way I got there was I had this nerd friend who went to another school that I met, and his name was Bob, and Bob and I would nerd out, and we would draw together all the time. We'd draw superheroes, movie characters, and stuff. And then Bob ended up going to Cal Arts a year before me. And then we actually knew another guy who was even a year older than Bob. This guy was an animator who wanted to go to California as well. So we got these three of us in Michigan wanted to go to California. The first guy's name is Dan. Dan is this amazing animator, and he gets into CalArts. And then Bob gets into CalArts. And so what I would do, once Dan and Bob were there, and I'm like a couple years behind them in school, I would send them drawings through the mail, snail mail, and they would critique my drawings. They would send me notes back on my drawings. And that's how I learned how to draw the way a Disney animator is supposed to draw. And something I tell people all the time, if you want to do something, no matter what it is in the industry, hang out with other people that do what you do. Don't isolate yourself. You need to hang out. If you're an artist, hang out with other artists. If you're a writer, hang out with other writers. If you're an actor, hang out with other actors. Whatever it is, if you're going to isolate yourself, you're never going to go anywhere. And if you're ever afraid to put your drawing up on the wall, as an artist, you have to put a drawing up on the wall. As a writer, you have to put a book in front of somebody. You have to put a page in front of somebody. People have to read your work or see your work. If you're going to be afraid, you're never going to go anywhere. So I'm here to encourage you not to be afraid. Because you know what? Every time you're afraid, somebody else is not going to be afraid. And they're going to succeed and you won't. You know, just give it a try. Because you know, I've got so many bad drawings and bad things I've written that no one will ever see. But there's the ones I actually get excited about. I go, hey, what do you think of that? You know, and everybody's going to love your stuff, and some people won't. Anyway, so I ended up going to CalArts back in 1983, and that was my first year. I was 18 years old, got the heck out of Michigan, went to California, and I've been here ever since. And I never worked for Disney. I got out here, and I ended up going to CalArts, learned all about animation, all my nerd friends. Everybody that I went to school with runs the industry now. Guys at Pixar, guys at Disney, guys all over or girls too, all over the industry. And I ended up going to television animation because I like telling stories faster. Because a movie, guys who work in the people who work in movies, they tell one story every 4 years. It takes 4 or 5 years to make an animated movie. With TV, I tell a new story every couple of weeks. So I can come up with stories and characters and all that sort of thing. And I was a cog in the machine for a while. I would be an artist. I was a character designer, I was a storyboard artist, and I was a prop artist. Like I worked on Dexter's Laboratory. Is there Dexter's Laboratory? I worked on that show, and I remember they were down the hall. There was this little clique of guys. They wouldn't have me in their clique at all. They didn't want anything to do with me. But one day they needed a background artist because they were really behind schedule. And I went, I can do background. I couldn't do background, but I can do background. But it was Dexter's Laboratory, so I was like this. I'll just draw a laboratory. I'll just draw rivets in the wall and monitors and ray guns and stuff, and I would just draw backgrounds. These are great. Can you do some more? Suddenly, I was part of it. Right? But the point is, raise your hand next time somebody asks if the job can be done, and you say, give it a try. You know. So I did that. Anyway, long story short, all the jobs I had in animation paid off when I sold my own show, Fairly Odd Parents, to Nickelodeon. I sold it back in 1998, and I sold it as a short cartoon. And by that time, I knew how to animate.
Sorry, that's before 2000.
Before 2000. That's the ancient time. But sold to Fairly Odd Parents, and then that show's been going ever since. And I can get into all the other stuff, but I have a couple other shows on Nickelodeon now as well. So they'll be producer, writer, and all that sort of thing. Yeah, so I'm sorry if I bored you.
Actually, I want to pick up on exactly what you said. Your encouragement is absolutely correct. To this day, and my kids, I have 4 kids, God bless them, they're all cursed by the fact that their father got to do pretty much what he was destined to do from the time that he was doodling on desks and making teachers very angry. Sorry, librarians. It's all because I had a dream and I just pursued it. And it can happen. That's not to say that you shouldn't be unrealistic about it. You know, if you're 95 years old and that dream hasn't materialized, it probably won't at that point. Right?
It depends on what you have to offer the dream.
Right, exactly. You have to have, some kind of balance in your life. But it shows that all this is possible if you want it. If you want it enough. It's what I always say is, it's not hard to be in the industry. It's hard to be good enough to be in the industry. And if you have that talent and you have that will, you will eventually rise to the top.
I tell people all the time, it's like, look, I'd rather hire a less talented, nice person than a talented prima donna any day. I've met some super talented people that are the most difficult people to work with. And I go, look, you are not this talented. I don't need you. The only one who could be that way is James Cameron, who created Avatar and Titanic, the 2 most successful movies of all time. I'm like, I'll let him slide a little bit, but even he shouldn't be that way. But it's like, look, I'd rather hire someone who I can train, who's nice, and also if you're coming into a studio or a situation where you're hired, we're hiring you so you can make our lives easier. We're hiring you to do the job. We don't want to have to sit there and we'll train you a little bit, but it's almost like hiring a guitar player in a band.
You know, we're up there playing, and I bring you up on stage. I need you to play the guitar. I don't have time to teach you how to play the guitar right now. You learn over there, and then you come to me when you're ready. That's what it is. But you know, when you get up there, okay, you can play it like this a little bit. I'll teach you a little bit, you know, my style and stuff like that. But it's all about being able to learn on your own, being a self-starter. You know, so then you hook up with a guy like Gorf, who's a self-starter, and I'm a self-starter. We're both like, okay, well, let's make something. We made this comic book. Would you guys like to see a little bit of the comic book? Yeah. A little bit? I don't know if any comic fan, you're a Green Lantern, you're a comic fan, okay. Just one. Comic book fan? Don't be ashamed, raise your hands high. Comic books are awesome.
There you go. The nerd culture was no shit.
No, I know. And by the way, you know why you should be proud? Because every successful movie, the only successful movies now are superhero movies. Right. Every movie is bad for some reason.
But by wearing this shirt, I'm trying to bring it back to where it came from.
Ruin it for everybody. Anyway,
that's for my kids. Very quickly, just shout out what comics do you read? Batman.
Cool.
Good. Checks in the mail. Right. Green Lantern, clearly. Mary?
I read like random ones. I did Starfire.
Starfire.
And Robin and
So Teen Titans.
yeah.
Or Teen Titans. I love that show.
And Harley Quinn.
Oh, okay. Then we have an association there. Because Harley Quinn is a character that I helped to bring into comics from the animated.
Look at that.
Yep. Dad.
I had a large X-Men collection.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, then a little plug, 12 o'clock on Sunday at LA Comic Con, I'm doing a panel with the creators of the X-Men animated series from the 1990s.
Oh,
so we'll be talking about that. But at the same time, Butch Hartman is giving a panel on...
I have two panels this weekend. I have a solo panel of myself about the industry and things that I do. And we have a Fairly Odd Parents panel on Sunday where we have the whole cast of the Fairly Odd Parents.
Also, one other question now. You know how most people base whatever series, whatever they come with, are those based, the characters based on anyone you know from Fairly Odd Parents?
Some of them are, and some of them aren't. Yeah, loosely based, a little bit here and there, yeah. But Mr. Crocker was Mr. Crocker was based on Eugene Levy from the movie Splash, actually. Eugene Levy in the movie Splash is trying to catch the mermaid, and then he's got the glasses and everything. He's obsessed, and so it'd be kind of funny to do that with a teacher who's trying to catch the characters. But yeah, so I didn't add this in my description. I grew up loving comics as well. I'm a huge comic book fan, and I really learned a lot about life through comic books. Believe it or not, I learned how to read better, learned how to tell stories better. I learned how to create action and dialogue and movie storytelling. That's what comic books are. The little movies on paper, they really are. And some of the artwork was amazing. The artists draw down is really it's astounding. I can't even come close to that. It's scary. But do you want to read a couple pages?
Yeah. By the way, I learned how to spell the word invulnerable in second grade. That was my thing. Yeah. And we met we nerded out. I don't know if I've ever told you the story, so I'm going to tell it publicly. Because that's a good way to tell you a story about yourself that you've never heard before.
Totally.
So I was doing a panel called Heroes in Faith at LA Comic Con. And the idea was get people of faith from different religions. We had Christians, Jews, and Muslims sitting on a panel and talking about how their faith inspires.
And we all tried to kill each other.
Right. Well, we did it with, huge spears of destiny and laser guns. And
yes, exactly.
It didn't work out too well because it didn't actually work. So, yeah. And I needed a Christian. So I had, and this is another good connection here. You talked about Disney. Disney
I was the Christian.
kind of brought us together. When I didn't grow up to the extent that I got larger in Chicago. I didn't have a friend, but I had a person who was kind of the guy who preceded me in everything. He was the guy that I knew was the other Jewish guy in the Jewish private day school that could draw really well. And I never met him because he was 5 years ahead of me or so. So I would enter the school as he was graduating. This kept happening. So years and years later, David was working at Disney, and we finally connected and became fast friends. And David Steinberg was the head of production at Nickelodeon, and he's the one that I turned to say, who do we got? And he said, oh, we ought to talk to Butch Hartman. So I contacted Butch Hartman and asked him, would you be on this panel? And he graciously agreed to do so. Now, thereafter, we only communicated very sporadically by text messages. And the text messages were brief and strident. And how come you didn't tell me where to park? Stuff like that. And I never told you this before. And after a while, I just started to get a kick out of this. Like, who does he think I am? So I started answering in a way where it was 2 levels,
Yeah.
where I give you the information you wanted, but I'm kind of laughing because I'm giving you an over-the-top answer also. So it was entertaining me. And then I finally met Butch in person, and he was nothing like the text messages. It's a sweetheart of a guy, an amazing guy. And I thought, what's going on here? I have to know
I
this
think the
guy.
day I texted you that was I was trying to get to the panel and I didn't know where to park. I was like, where the heck are you?
It's
And I had my wife and mother-in-law with me too.
Oh,
So-
there you go. Okay, that's good reason.
Where's the bathroom? Why are we in yet? That sort of.
You sure you're not Jewish?
Well, where are we? Yeah, exactly.
So, long story short, we met, and I don't remember who suggested, but hey, you know, let's get together and talk comics. And then we started brainstorming, and we had a whole bunch of ideas. I don't remember what the other ideas were, but it morphed into this thing. And it's hard to tell who came up with what, so it's truly a
We
partnership.
actually pitched this as a show to Nickelodeon first. We pitched it as a TV series. And they, of course, said no. So we,
No, actually, they said yes, and then the guy got fired the next day.
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Wasn't it, what's his name?
I can't remember his name.
Brian Wright.
Yeah.
And he is now the producer of Stranger Things on Nickelodeon.
No
Netflix.
way.
Yes, he is. Yes,
No
he is.
way.
Yes, he is. This could have been Stranger Things, but it'll be even cooler.
It still can be.
It still can be.
Right. Right.
Now, I wish I could say that I drew this. We did not draw this. The guy who drew this is Erez Zadok. He's an Israeli guy, lives actually in Israel. He's
Oh, I was gonna
fantastic.
say, yeah, I got that little blanket thing going on.
He's fantastically talented, and we auditioned about 10 different artists for this until we
Yeah.
landed on him. And this guy is just incredible. I mean, so talented. So if you get a chance to follow on Instagram or something, by all means do. He is as much a part of this as we are, just he lives in Israel, couldn't be here tonight. But he's super fantastic.
Right, and by the way, before we begin, a little plug. I'm working with Erez on a new project called the Passover Haggadah graphic novel. So for Passover, if you want to be able to bring
It's
a
almost as
comic
cool
book-
as a Spider-Man book.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's illustrating that, and the guy is just brilliant. So you've got your Hebrew text on one side, and your comic book on the other side. This is a real thing, folks. Your grandmother cannot tell you to put the comic book away on Passover. So there you go. Let's read the original. So he's illustrating that. It's
So real quick, we're going to just read this to you. This is like page, again, remember how we told you about telling a story as a comic book is different than telling it as an animated show or like as a movie. We have to make it into like a movie type of structure. So go ahead.
All right, I will be the narrator, and he will be the
I'll read the characters. Okay.
Very good. They say high school is the most terrifying part of growing up.
And
The
clock-
scary classes.
And the clock is almost at 3 o'clock. Here's the teacher. There'll be a very serious exam tomorrow, one so hard it will induce post-traumatic stress in each of you. It's a goal I've longed to achieve. We all have dreams.
Let me give you a little bit faster, more intense.
Oh, got it, okay.
Yeah, by the way, who's that reference to? Who directs like that? It's George Lucas.
Oh, got it,
This
yes.
is only direction. Sorry, the inside joke there.
Okay,
Okay,
we're in a classroom. It's almost 3 o'clock.
panel number 3, the scary people.
You call that spirit? My grandma has more spirit wheeling herself to the canasta table. I've seen her play, ladies, for real.
The scary food.
Hey, Miss Cronenberg, you get us a spot? Thank you, Mr. Washington. We need every drop we can save for tomorrow's nutritional lunch. Not even surprised. Closer to 3 o'clock.
Me? I don't think that's so scary. Yeah, this is my first semester in high school. Oh, my school, I don't want you to read it over here because it's a little easier.
Yes, I can't see it up there.
Okay. Any school, I've always been home. I need to read it over here. This is my first semester in high school. My school, I've always been homeschooled. What do I know? Mayflower High is way bigger than I'm used to. Up till now, my classroom has always been the sum total of me, my mom, and my sister at our dining room table.
Let's stop for a second. We're zeroing in on that guy right there in the back. See him up there? What's his name? His name is Drew, right?
Yep.
Drew. And what's kind of cool about this is as we're telling the story, we're slowly introducing you to our characters, but you don't really know it yet. We zero on him, that girl in the front of that panel on the top right, the girl on the left, she's a main part of the club. This guy here, Roland Washington, he's a jokester, dangling a little rubber spider in front of a girl, and then she freaks out, falls down here. And we're slowly introducing this lady here. She's like the school, I guess she's kind of the janitor,
Yeah, she's a lunch
lady, but
you know.
she plays a major role in the show later on. So what do you do when you tell a comic story? You suddenly introduce characters all the way through the very beginning, and then they start playing out in the story as we go forward. So go ahead. So we're here now.
Yeah, but just to build on what you said, the fun part of it is a good story or a good character will begin to write itself. And we got to a point where these characters were literally writing themselves. I don't think we even intended for the lunch lady to be a major character.
No, we didn't.
But something happened along the way that's just the way the story dictated we should go, so we went with it.
Yep, and this is only a 5-issue series too. We had to tell the whole story in 5 issues. And so we actually there's an end to the story, but it could completely go on if we wanted it to. It could extend out into 20, 30 issues.
Yeah, we ended up world building. We intended to just have something that would be fun, that would be a little lark. And the next thing we know, we have historical illusions and time travel and monsters and a whole portal with a world in and of itself and all kinds of stuff that just got packed into this 5-issue series to the point where both editors were wanting to wring our necks. There's too much in here.
I think we realized that this might be our only chance to do a comic book, so let's put as much junk in here as we possibly can. But it all completely works. It's not like over and over again. Really,
Right.
really
Well, the
works.
hardest part is he writes this amazing dialogue. So as we said earlier, he was writing it as an animation piece, and his people are rapid fire. Repartee like 1940s serials. That's the kind of stuff that you write. It's snappy, it's funny, it's jokes in it. I mean, you're a machine when it comes to that. So he hands it to me. He says, "Okay, edit it." How? It's so good.
But he's an amazing editor, because I could not have done this without him at all. Because he would catch things I would miss. He was on the colorist. He was like, this color doesn't work. Because of Gorf, this thing looks so great color-wise. He would arrange the panels for the right. Gorf's a very, very talented comic editor. So kudos to you, sir.
Thank you. Kudos right back at you.
So
So Mayflower High is way bigger than I'm used to. Up to now, my classroom has been the sum total of me, my mom, and my sister at her dining room table. Fun times. Learning happened. Mostly. But as a result, I'm a bit light in the socializing department. I watch basic cable. I know the stereotype. Creepy loner homeschool kid. But we're not like that.
Spider! Roland falls backwards, we cut away, we're back to...
Right, and this is neat storytelling because we're showing lots of different stuff happening all at the same time, and we're reestablishing it on each page so that when we pay off the gag, you'll still remember what happened and be able to understand it. As opposed to, we could have totally done this would have been legitimate. When Roland is falling, the next panel we could have shown what happens when he falls. But because we're building up to 3 o'clock, the title of the thing is 3 o'clock club after all, we wanted to really have some interesting fun with pacing it, with playing with
And
time.
to make our lives even more miserable, we decided to write 6 characters in the story. So you've got to service every character a little bit, and so keep going on by every bottom panel.
We're just like everyone else.
You wanted to read these descriptions.
I know. We hang out, play ball, prank people, we even fall asleep in class. Try to do that when your teacher's your mom. When mom enrolled us in public high school, she said we were totally prepared. I doubted her. How would I fit in?
Heads up! Boom! Join a club, she said. So now we see that our guys are beginning to look at the clock. She's looking at her watch. She's tapping her watch. He's got his thumb up. He now is missing the ball because he's looking up at the clock. And you see the next page.
And look at the way, and I don't even think we did this. I think this is Eras who did this. Panel 2, guy blowing the bubble. It took us 4 panels to get to the bubble popping, and yet only a fraction of a second has passed in that amount of time.
That's cool. It's pretty cool. So yeah, there's her watch.
2 months in, I can report that Mom was right. Panel 2. Classes are fine. Panel 3. People are nice.
And then now we see that's character 1, character 2, character 3, all looking at the clock.
Panel 4, we see the result from the previous page of Roland falling into the trash can. Right?
Exactly.
Food's edible, as long as you don't ask what's in it. Panel 5. So, high school, scary?
It's 2:59.
Not so much.
Except for one part. Pulls out a pocket watch. The club I joined.
And what club would that be?
Now it's 3 o'clock. Open, Drew, start the countdown. What? Oh yeah, right. Now a dinosaur appears. And we have one of this awesome splash page, of course. I'll kick over to Mirror 7. Things that should happen at 3 o'clock. Go to school, hang with friends, go home. things that shouldn't happen. Giant dinosaurs attack school.
3 o'clock club, chapter 1, what we did in school today.
And this is our dinosaur, and this is our last page, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, not our last page in the book, the last page for the night, but we call this dinosaur the candy cornosaurus. And you'll see this big candy corn on top of the tent. Because they ended up defeating, don't they end up defeating a dinosaur with candy or something?
Spoiler alert.
But anyway, but Ares did an amazing job on this splash panel, and it's just so great. But you can see this being a movie. You can see this right now being a feature film. And,
Well, let's ask you, do you see this being a movie? Yes, you do.
But anyway, it's really cool. So then now, this is the threat they have to defeat. And so now the next few pages are them. And what's really cool about the 3 o'clock club, they all have ancient weapons they use. Each one has their own specialty weapon. One guy's got like, you want to go next page? Oh yeah, he's got a staff, like an old, like a steampunk staff. She's got these goggles. She's a gamer. She has like goggles and this little device, and she has this orb that flies around and shoots like laser beams and stuff. And Roland, the African American guy, has this pogo stick with a giant boxing glove on it. Yeah, there it is right there. It's like awesome. I mean, he's got these bolos. They all pull out their weapons. We'll introduce them all. 1, 2, 3. Shane Quintero, Drew Jung, Zell Bashir, Roland Washington III. Let's do this. And then there's a dinosaur looking in the window. And now they're ready for action. So.
And funny things happened along the way. We ended up building the pogo stick into continuity. There's a reason why he actually has that ridiculous weapon. The line XYZ 360 formation. So Butch wrote that in his dialogue pass, and I ended up repeating that over and over and over again. And then I realized, well, you know what? I have to figure out what that actually looks like. He keeps calling that, and you know, each time they're in a different formation. Well, no, they got to be.
I think I helped you describe it a little bit, maybe, but
I ended up making it just they're in a circle back to back.
like an Avengers thing.
Yeah, an Avengers thing, right?
But and what's cool about the series that we did, I think in episode 3 or 4, actually issue 3 or 4, we ended up going back in time to the club from the 1960s. And we'd meet the kids from the 60s, and we had to change all their dialogue, like, Nito, Daddy-O, and things like that, you know? and I think we did like a sepia tone look to it.
Yeah, we did big dots like in
And we used all white kids in the 60s. Like they were all like white kids, right? Like
Except for one.
Except for one. But it wasn't
Right.
only Roland's dad. But it wasn't a super diverse group. It was like everybody, you know, the way it was back then. It was like, you know, just mostly people just stuck to their own whatever. But it was just kind of cool because like the kids had flat top haircuts and they have all these older things and they're talking about like, you know, like the Civil War, the civil race riots and all that sort of thing. So it's really, really a lot of fun. We really got to experiment with a lot of fun stuff, which was cool. Any questions or comments thus far? Even if it's not about this, anything you want to know about Gorf, anything you want to know about me, we're happy to tell you guys because you're here, you're our friends. You guys showed up for a day. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering what the idea behind, other than the reading a comic book at ISOC, what was the idea behind the doing the comic book version of the...
Oh, this here, by the way, you can pass this up around. Sorry, I'll say that. You know, we talked a little bit before that both of us are religious people, and it's a lot of fun and games doing the comic book stuff, but many times we'll go off on tangents when we're not talking about Star Wars prequels or whatever. By the way, Butch has a podcast that I encourage, and a YouTube channel that I encourage everybody to watch and to listen to. Can you give us that address quickly?
Yes, the YouTube channel is just called Butch Hartman, Super Creative Name. And the podcast is called Speech Bubble. And we just premiered it about a month ago. So I'm on my 4th episode now. It's a lot of fun. I just kind of rant and talk about all the fun things I like to do. My stuff is always very family friendly, so there's no reason to worry about F words being tossed about, things like that. I don't believe that sort of thing. I think
F words, food.
Food, fun. Yes, exactly. I believe you can tell a great story without resorting to that. I think there's more clever ways around that sort of thing. I think the world is crying out for more family-friendly entertainment and stuff. So that's kind of where I try to stay in that little less.
And the Noob Network.
Yes, and I have an app called the Noob Network, and I can show you a little bit of that. I need such a crowd, so I can show you my.
You'll have to pull the thing out of the laptop and just put it in there in order to get up on screen. But I'm curious, I'll answer your question in a second. I apologize for putting you off. Butch, you touched on something interesting here. Oh, so we're both people of faith, and we end up having all kinds of tangents talking about what's the difference between Christianity and Judaism on this. I referenced before this panel on heroes and faith, so we have this whole roundtable about that, and the discussion has continued between us.
Yes.
And there was something that you just said a moment ago that I wanted to pick up on, and I've lost that train thoughts?
It was about, gosh, what was it, guys? Family-friendly stuff?
Yes, thank you very much. Family-friendly stuff.
Family-friendly stuff.
So, Butch, I wanted to ask you while you're plugging that in over there. You say well, I'm not going to put words into your mouth. How do you take a situation that you know would be very funny, that would be a layup if you did, a bodily function gag, and instead made it something that was more appropriate for the youngest possible viewers? How do you tailor a joke for the right audience?
That's
What
a
I'm
good
asking.
question. I just think, I always write stuff that I like. I think you're going to start off writing stuff that you like. Because you're going to have to live with it and work with it and enjoy working on it. And if you are just going to resort to like bodily function jokes, you're not going to be much of a writer because anybody can do that. anyone can write that. But how can you get past the fact that someone, we've done very few bodily function jokes in Fairly Odd Parents, but we always try to make them extremely clever and necessary. And we try and find a funny way around it. I think that's the real challenge about that sort of stuff. We did one episode where I forget what it was. Timmy makes a wish, and I forget why. He's in the bathtub when he makes the wish, and he goes, "Oh, I wish I was in the movies." They make him go to the movies, but he's still in his birthday suit because he was in the bathtub. So he's naked across town, has to get back home across town, but we never show him naked. We show him very cleverly behind bushes and behind trees, behind benches and things. And so he's terrified that he's naked, but we never see it. And you kind of fall in love with that aspect of it because it's a little more frustrating if you don't get to see it. I think a lot of cartoons now try and be too adult for no reason. They try and, well, it's an adult cartoon, and I'm like, well, so what? Why do you tell all these dirty sex things all the time? It gets boring, it gets old, it gets very old.
You just tweeted about that. Why can't cartoons just be fun?
Yeah, exactly. I did. It got a good response, too.
Rightfully so. What frame of mind were you in that motivated you to tweet that?
I think I had just seen an ad for some Netflix cartoon that I'm not going to name anything, but it was just one of those things like, really, another one? Really, we're doing this again? Oh, look at that, You said a question.
No.
Okay. But yeah, so, as a counter punch to the family-friendly stuff, or to the anti-family-friendly stuff, I've got my own app on the App Store, and it's called the Nude Network, if I can find it here. Oh, here's our logo. Let me find my logo. Yeah, there we go. That's what it's called, the Nude Network. And a nude is a little creature. When you go on the iPhone, it's an iPhone app. And when you go on the Nude Network, these little guys are called nudes. And you get a free nude that guides you around the school, a cartoon world that I do. And you have live action shows, you have games, you have cartoons on there as well. And they're all original. You can't find them anywhere else. And I'm slowly adding to it all the time. Adding cartoons, adding live shows, adding games. And I want to make this the next, Netflix, or Netflix's children's arm, or whatever you want to call it. That's my goal. I've worked at Nickelodeon for a long, long time. They're even doing stuff I'm not crazy about it anymore. I think they do a lot of shows that are about, I don't know, things I don't. I think they take the low road sometimes and don't really need to. It's not Nickelodeon as a whole, but some shows lately haven't really oh really, they went with that show, So I'm trying to avoid that sort of thing and go back to the shows that I grew up with, shows that made me feel good, shows that were fun. So I'm going to show you guys a little sizzle reel if I can of what we have here.
Do you think audiences still respond to that?
What's that? Family friendly stuff?
Yeah, family friendly stuff.
Haven't most of the biggest successful movies in the last 5 years been family films? Frozen, Zootopia, Despicable Me. Any other one you can think of. There's tons of successful family-friendly films out there. And it really bothers me when I see parents take their kids to the movie It. I know it's the most successful horror film of all time, but I didn't even go see it, but a friend of mine saw it and said there were two 9-year-olds in the seats next to me. I'm like, really? I know taking it. And when I was a kid, I was taken to movies like that, and they scared the heck out of me, and I grew up with lots of fear. I don't like putting fear into kids. I like putting fun into kids. That's just my own personal opinion. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I like to do that.
Well, you touched on an important thing there, which is responsibility. As creators, we have a responsibility to entertain, but also to entertain appropriately to whoever our target audience is.
And you have a big responsibility as a creator. If you're going to have a platform, you get a show on television, you get a comic book printed, or you get a novel printed, or whatever it's going to be. You have a platform now where people listen to you. And what are you going to do with that responsibility? You want to take that responsibility and go like, hey, I'm just going to make a cartoon for my pot smoking buddies and we're all going to laugh. It's like, well, there's a whole big audience out there that's really, you have a chance to influence a whole generation of kids. You really do. And how are you going to use that? You know, it's almost like with great power comes great responsibility. Like, I don't have the kind of platform other people have, like George Clooney has, but I have my own platform. You know? And I'm going to use that the best way I can. Am I perfect? No. Am I going to do it right all the time? No. But I'm going to try and do it the best I can all the time. I know Gorf is the same way. Here's a little bit of the Nuke Network, just a little sizzle reel if it'll work. Might work. There's sound. There's sound. These are some of the shows that we have available.
Well, while you're doing that, on Batman, which is what my internship at DC Comics led to, we had a very fast and hard rule that none of the violent behavior, because Batman is a PG-13 world, nowadays it's even a rated R world, none of the violent behavior could be imitatable by kids. So for example, no Molotov cocktails, because it's too easy for a kid to be able to see that and go, oh, I could make one of those. So that's why the action was always a little bit outlandish, and we always tried to keep it in the realm of fantasy, not make it too real. One of the constructive criticisms I would give to the otherwise wonderful superhero material that we're seeing on television, you know, the shows on the CW, for example, is I think that the people who are writing them are a little bit too locked up into their coast mindset, their post-college coast mindset, and they're forgetting that 10-year-olds are going to be drawn in because, oh, it's The Flash, oh, it's Supergirl, oh, it's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And
how important is theme to a project like Fear Black Belt? Are you trying to educate with that, or is what's your priority? Are you entertaining first, then educating, or are you starting out?
I think it's entertaining first. And it's a very less than PG comic. It's a very family-friendly comic.
yeah, it's pretty G.
Pretty G-rated, but I mean, there's, you know, I wouldn't say there's any edgy things in there, but it's just one of those things that you can still tell a great story. I always point to Jerry Seinfeld, super clean comedian, doesn't say an F word, doesn't say it, but he's one of the most successful comics of all time. So we can't be done. You know?
Yeah, to address your question over there, I think that, at least with the work that I do, because I come from a Judeo-Christian background, I feel like, exactly what Butch said, we have a platform. We have the ability to speak to a tremendous number of people, and that's a gift, that's a blessing. And I want to be able to take advantage of that in a constructive way, where people will get something out of it. They'll leaving feeling entertained and hopefully smiling, but I want them to be thinking too. Because if I haven't done that, then what's the sense? It's empty calories. You know, I want to give them a good kosher meal.
So this, I don't have the sizzle reel for some reason won't play here together, but here's some images from the Nuke Network you can see. So a Nuke is a little creature, and they guide you through the land of Nuke, and they take you around, and you can find cartoons and games and live action shows. So here's some things that we did. Here's what the land of Nuke looks like. It's a little island, and that's where the Nukes live. And right now I'm trying to build this whole world out. I'm only on this part of the end. And I want kids to be able to go all over this and play games and just be able to be there. I want a parent to be able to take the iPhone and give it to a kid and they can sit there for 27 hours and just play stuff. Here's a cartoon we did called Jetpack Well Space Avenger. And Jetpack Well flies around space looking to avenge things, but he can never find anything to avenge. So he'll avenge like the toaster, and he'll avenge like the toilet. And that's his sidekick, Fuzzy Carl. And so Fuzzy Carl says, well, he goes, I need something to avenge. He goes, well, the toaster burned my toast this morning. And he says, where are you, toaster? So that's Jetpack Well.
He looks an awful lot like you.
No, he doesn't.
Gone from personal experience to the bad incident with the toaster at breakfast.
When you get a Nuke, when you buy a Nuke on the Nuke Network, they cost coins. We have Nuke nickels on the network. This is what the animation looks like. This is Scooby-Doo. And that's animation that I did. But I realized when I started making this network, I didn't do all the animation because I don't cost anything. You know, if I had to pay another animator to do it, it would cost a pretty penny. So I do the animation myself for now. I do have other animators working for me now. Here's a show called Uncle Duck that we did. This is about the world's, I guess you could say, the world's funnest yet most scary, destructive uncle. He's all ducked up. It's like the mom says, every story is, okay, Uncle Duck, watch the kids, be nice. He goes, you got it. And then the mom leaves, they go to space, they go places they're not supposed to go. That's Uncle Duck, and there's a few other things I can show. Oh, then we do live action stuff too. This is a show called, where is it? Oh, here. Oh, by the way, I have my own Ronald McDonald. This is Nuke Dude. Whenever I had to make a person, he came to Comic-Con with me a couple years ago. Nuke Dude is my superhero who walks around promoting the Nuke Network. And I drew like 10 different costumes, and I said, which one do you want to wear? And he goes, I want to wear this one. And I said, okay. So we had that costume made for him.
Here's booties.
Yeah, don't knock the boots, great. And this is a game that's on there called Flip-O-Potamus. It's a little ninja hippo that flips around and throws pandas and dragons as weapons.
So Butch, you have so many ideas. Do you have a whole drawer full of things that you haven't even gotten to yet?
I do indeed, sir. Yeah, I do. But you know, it's fun because I even now, my wife's always after me to go out and do stuff. And I'm like, my happy place is at my desk, just doing my own thing. You know?
How do you organize your day? How do you get it all done?
Well, I love to say my faith gets me through the day. That's the first thing I say. I owe a lot to the Lord. But, you know, I get out like today. This morning I had to get my wife's oil changed, get back home, load up the truck, get down to Comic-Con, put all my stuff in my booth. My booth wasn't even built. It was supposed to be built because the Comic-Con was tomorrow. Had to wait for them to build my booth, put all my stuff in, change my clothes, and get over here. That was my day to day. And fortunately, there's a coffee shop right downstairs. I got a bite to eat, which was nice.
And you drew. This is an opportunity for you to pull out your portfolio.
Oh, my portfolio!
Yes, I want to see some of that artwork.
Oh, I was drawing some stuff when I was sitting down in the cafe. I didn't draw this in the cafe, but I drew this is for Comic-Con. I drew a picture of TV's Adam West. You know, that's in pencil. And I got a whole bunch of stuff in here that there's a new game out called Bendy and the Ink Machine. Remember this game? Yeah, so I was really excited. So I drew Timmy Turner with Bendy. But then after I drew this, it's a very evil game, so I don't show this picture to anybody, but I drew the picture. I'm like, oh, that'll be fun. Oh, that's okay. So, anyway, and I drew a picture of Adam West plays a character on my show named Catman on Fairly Odd Parents. So I drew a picture of Adam West as Batman fighting Catman. And what's funny with me, that's why we relate to each other so much. Every time I sit and doodle, I'll doodle a superhero. I don't know why. I do stuff like this as well, but I'll do superheroes too.
Can you walk us through the process of how you come up with an idea?
Yeah, like anybody comes up with an idea, I guess. You have to be ready to be open to have ideas, and you have to know that you can have ideas. Don't sit there and think, oh, I can't have any ideas. I'm worth nothing. No one will ever like my ideas. If that's the attitude you're going to have, there's an expression in the Bible, it's actually a scripture in the Bible that says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. That's in your section of the Bible. That's in Proverbs, pal. Yeah, I know. Good writing. But it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and you're going to be whatever you say you're going to be. How many of us, when we say we're going to be sick, what happens? We get sick, right? But if we say we're going to be healthy and strong, I'm going to be successful, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to be successful and strong. Go into any library. Oh, we're in a library. Look at that. Go to the library.
The Beverly Hills Library.
The library. Go into there. How big is the self-help section in this library? The power of positive thinking. The power of positive speaking. Right? Those are all biblical principles. Nobody wants to admit it, but that's what they are. So my point is that you can be whatever you say you're going to be. And if you want to be a success, you can be what you say. And I know you say it as well all the time. But coming up with an idea, man, like for example, I got these cartoon ideas, I decided to start making them myself. Now I can't make hour-long cartoons, they're very expensive, but these cartoons are 30 seconds, they're a minute, they're 2 minutes, they're little pilot cartoons that I make. Right? Here's a live-action show that I wrote. I always wanted to make this show. Here it is. It's called Scarlet. It's about a girl who becomes a success in the music industry. And I wrote this for a red-headed girl, and then I couldn't use her. She was unavailable. So I hired this girl who was actually a better singer than the other girl. I had her weave a little red thing into her hair, which was even cooler. And this is just me taking my camera, taking pictures of her. And then I went to Photoshop with the title there. And then we shot a live-action movie. We shot Scarlet is 10. It's 10 episodes long. Every episode is about 4 minutes long. So it's about a 40-minute movie. And it's pretty cool. And I got to write the song that she sings. And she's a girl who gets into the music industry and realizes that her idol, she meets this girl who's her idol, and her idol steals her demo song. So she has to get her demo song back with the big sing-off. So we shot.
When an idea doesn't come to fruition the way you expected it to, because I see kids all the time who will be so wrapped up in the perfection that they can't finish something because it doesn't meet their original vision for whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
Right.
How do you move past that in your work?
How do you move past, there's some shots on set and stuff, and how do you move past what?
How do you move past the imperfection? You know, they say, what is it? Imperfection is the enemy of progress, or something like that, right?
You have to move past the imperfection because it's never going to be perfect. You know, I've done so many cartoons over the years. People say, "You're 100% happy with all your cartoons?" And I go, "I'm nearly 65% happy with my cartoons, but I have a deadline to meet, and I have to be happy with it to get on to the next cartoon. Hopefully, the next cartoon I can run." But see, I've signed a contract with the studio. I've got to have X amount of episodes done by this time. And if I don't get it done, if I'm a prima donna, if I stamp my feet, they're going to kick me out and find someone else to finish it. You've got to learn to be happy with what you need. And by the way, learn your limitations. These movies I'm doing here, I know that I can't go to all these locations and do all this, but I can write movies based on the locations I know. There's my house. There's my backyard. I have an office that I rent. I can shoot the office. That was the music company for Scarlett. This will be the music studio right here.
Right, but the time you showed up in my bedroom at midnight, that was a little...
I know. That was a key part of the story.
Yeah, okay, but you adjusted, which is the whole point.
That's what I'm saying.
The whole point of this.
And by the way, I know you've worked on live action sets too, but on live action sets, you're like, okay, this isn't working. How am I going to do this? I did a show called Zach 2.0. This is Zach 2.0. Zach is this young stranger that shows up in town and no one knows who he is, but he's there. He has an agenda because he's looking for this girl. And it turns out they're mortal enemies and they're from a different dimension. We dole that out. It takes a long time to get through it. Anyway, Zach has these powers. He can point at things and they float to him and things like that. I had a scene where I needed him to lift off the ground, and we're like, once we got there, okay, it's time for the lifting off scene. We're like, and they go, "Butch, how are we going to do this?" And I went, "Don't know." And then I went, "Wait a minute." And I was thinking, do I put ropes under his arms and then take him out digitally? Oh my God, the cost. Oh, wait a minute. I know what we'll do. Put the camera on his feet. Put the camera on his feet. And I just had him go like this, and I'll go like that. So we see his feet lift off, and then I said, okay, now, cut to his, I put the camera on his upper torso. I said, squat down, and he went like that. And when you cut them both together, it's like, oh my God, it's lifting off the ground. How did they do that? So there's ways around it. Yeah, that you can do practically. Yes, ma'am.
So, is the 3 o'clock club available?
Oh, heck yes, it's available. Yes, we don't have any here.
Well, I have one issue that I brought that you can look at and pass around. It's available in trade paperback now at all your fine comic book stores.
Yeah, it's graphic novel.
Comic Buzz have it?
There you go. That's
You
what
go
it looks like.
online, you can get online and buy
Digital and print, but the print is nice. They did a wonderful, I'm a geek when it comes to paper stocks. They did this wonderful kind of velvety kind of paper stock for the cover. It's really tactile and very interesting. Is tactile the word? It is now.
This is me and my wife. We shot a show called Lincoln High. These kids came to me from my daughter's school actually, and they pitched me a show idea. And they said, hey, they were like, hey, we have this idea. There's 2 teenage kids. They were really funny. And they said, we really have this show idea. We'd love to do it. And I said, what is it? And they told me it's about 2 kids that come to a brand new school. They're really nervous, not going to meet anybody like them. I said, okay. But we play all the characters. Oh, so the opening shot is them coming to school going, we're not going to meet anybody like us. Then they play the cheerleaders, and they play the nerds, and they play the jocks, and they play the teachers. So it's like, there was a million costume changes, and they're like, look at that over there. Then we cut to them like the nerds, like on their little, iPads or whatever, yeah, then we cut to them. They're also the hall monitors. We did some split screen stuff that was really fun, so it's actually pretty fun. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great
It was a great idea. They did a great job. So anyway, they were like, we got to shoot at the high school. But do you know how much it costs to shoot at a high school? It costs about $8,000 a day. We're like, I can't shoot at the high school. But we were friends with the principal of the high school. She goes, are there kids in this movie? And I said, yeah. She goes, bingo, it's a student film. It will cost you nothing. All I have to do is be there. I said, great. And so we sent her a nice wine basket. That cost me about $50. And then we got to shoot at the high school for 2 days.
That's amazing. So you do all these things.
Yes, sir.
Can you walk me through a creative day? Butch Hartman wakes up in the morning, you have Nickelodeon, you have New, you have all kinds of other projects, you have comic books and everything else. How do you, in your head, get into a place where you can pull off doing all of this creative work simultaneously and successfully?
You have to do it, you have to compartmentalize it. You can't do it all in one day. I've got a little bit of Fairly Odd Parents to work on one day. I've got a little bit of this to do one day. I really wake up and never stop working is what I do. I don't really stop doing what I do. I don't ever take a break. I shouldn't say that. I'll take breaks, but my break is my job. I mean, if I take a break from work, I'll go have lunch, I'll bring my sketch pad and I'll draw. You know what I mean? It's not really stopping. And then I'll get back from lunch, I'll put it down, I'll storyboard, I'll do whatever. You know, my wife and I have to have a date night every week, which we're trying to work into our schedule. We're trying very hard. My wife's just as busy as me, though, so we're trying to get that in there.
Right, because there's Hartman House also.
I have a foundation called Hartman House, yes. We do charitable work. In fact, all the money I'm raising this weekend at the Comic-Con is going towards my foundation. So,
In that case, I will buy something.
there you go. Thank you. But real quick, then if I have a Fairly Odd Parents table, like I've got to do a storyboard, I've got to direct voices, I've got to do the editing, I've got to do music. I kind of oversee all of that stuff. And, you know, now we're pitching shows elsewhere as well for other companies now and stuff. So it's just I don't know, man. It's just a lot of fun. I'm gonna keep doing it as long as I can keep doing it. It keeps me young.
Yeah.
You too.
Hopefully.
I know.
Yeah.
Are you younger than me? You're younger than me, aren't you? Like way younger? Like aren't you like 41 or something?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. Good. 41. Yeah.
Your check's in the mail.
Exactly.
The Hartman House.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So I have 6 nephews and I wanted to introduce them to the comic book. What would you suggest their very ages for to, like to 12?
What comic book would you suggest for them?
Well,
Like young comics, like Archie comics would be good for those guys.
you know what I would say is, standing on one foot, my go-tos would be some of the older comics to get them into it. The contemporary comics, I'm trying to think of what some of the wonderful ones that I'm reading right now are. Squirrel Girl from Marvel is quite entertaining and would be entertaining for all of those age groups. What else have I read recently that people have recommended to me? Having a hard time off the top of my head thinking of
There's so many
which ones
comics
would be
out
right.
there, but then you go to every
Librarians.
comic store and ask what it's age appropriate.
There's a lot of great picture books now being written by animators and people, Mo Willems, John Klassen,
Right, well, Mo Willems, Pig and Elephant and Piggy, right. And that's more of it's kind of it lives in between a picture book and a comic book. But in terms of comic books per se, is there a librarian at the Beverly Hills Library who oversees this particular part of circulation? You know, who's the comic book expert?
yeah, well, we have a couple people, but our children's librarians are all reading those, you know, and can recommend them, and there's a whole segment of easy readers.
So here's a few examples. Archie Comics now has recently redone their line. This is an Archie comic that I wrote. And the Big Moose special. Hey, Archie Comics, where's my next assignment? And they have done a wonderful job in the comics making it relevant to today's audience. You can still get the classic look for the 6-year-olds, and you can get the older, more contemporary look for older people. I don't mean to be plugging other companies. Michael Midas Champion is a graphic novel I created about a superhero whose true superpower is the support of his family, and he needs to learn that lesson. So that's another series that you can pick up. 3 O'Clock Club, of course. There's a wonderful line, Roar Comics at Lion Forge, that publishes 3 O'Clock Club. And Lion Forge has established different lines for different age groups, so it's really clear who things are meant for. And Roar is their, I don't know what demographic specifically, but I would guess probably like 7 to 13 demographic or something, but hopefully the comics are successful in that great Bugs Bunny tradition where they work for adults and they work for kids. So when you read 3 O'Clock Club as an adult, you're going to get depth in the story that a kid wouldn't necessarily pick up on.
It's a very dense story, it really is.
Yeah. And I neglected to answer your question earlier, what led me to the Passover Haggadah graphic novel? And the answer is all of these things that we've been talking about over the last hour, which is I want to entertain, I want to illuminate, I want to educate, I want to excite. I think most of those are E words, maybe an I in there somewhere. And nothing like a little
Illumination.
And one of the challenge, well, let me give you a little quick backstory. I was invited by the Munich Jewish Museum to do a series of my JewishCartoon.com comics to be in their permanent exhibition. And as you can imagine, the Munich Jewish Museum is focused on the interaction between Jews and non-Jews in the 20th century. That's a big part of it. So basically, they said the assignment was, we want you to do Holocaust comic strips with punchlines.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and my first response was, you know, the guy who drew Mouse, I'll give him MAUS, I'll give him I'll give you his email address, Art Spiegelman. They said, no, we want you to do it because we think newspaper-style 4-panel comic strips is the best way to communicate this. So I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it because if I let somebody else do it, then maybe they'll screw it up. If somebody's going to mess it up, let it at least be me. Thank God.
I've messed up so many other things.
Yeah, it's based on my experience.
That's exactly
right. So that was an incredibly provocative and mind-blowing experience, going to Munich regularly for 18 months, doing research and creating these cartoons, and then seeing the work in a permanent exhibition. The only way that that work is coming down is if they take a sledgehammer to the wall, which, you know, some people might want to do. So I thought, well, what's the next project? After a tough project like that, let's do an easy one. Let's take a book that abridges the entire Bible out of order and then does it as dinner theater with bitter herbs. Let's do a book on that. And that became the genesis for this project. So all joking aside, my hope is that we can open up this very esoteric and very, I mean, it's filled with all kinds of erudition and fancy words like that, that it's tough to get into. It's very tough read if you really get into it. And most people just enjoy the dinner theater aspect of it. Hey, we were slaves. A friend of mine has a great song. We're in music. I do a cappella. He does instruments. We're like peanut butter and chocolate. And my friend wrote a great song called They Tried to Kill Us. We Survived. Let's Eat. Right? Which is basically the summary of that book. Right. So can I do that in a graphic novel? Well, we're about to find out. Yeah, follow up.
My mom, she would always have a phrase to explain Jewish holidays to not Jewish people, which is, we had a battle, we won, let's eat. We had a battle, we lost, let's fast.
Oh, that's good. We got to do a sequel then. Thank you. Can we borrow that? That's excellent.
Guys, I got to run pretty soon. Any more questions? We're happy to answer. Yes, sir.
What would you recommend for someone who wants to do voice for animation? Because I do voice now for commercial. But I would like to do animation because I used to read to my niece when she was a little girl, comic books, all types of things, different voices and stuff like that. So now she's 21 and she went to school for animation. She's actually in school. She goes to CCA now. And so I just wanted to continue on with the animation part.
Do you do voices regularly for like your job? You make a living at it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So you must know a lot of people. Do you have an agent?
I don't have.
You don't have an agent? Oh, normally, okay, well, you actually find the jobs and book them yourself? Well, that's really great. If you get an agent, you're going to open yourself into a whole different world of connections too. Your agent will be able to let you know where the jobs are. And also the animation community is a very small community. But once you get in, you work all the time. But it's breaking. What I would suggest is take a couple of animation workshops. Get in with some animation voice teachers. And they will definitely help you because you're going to be in with a bunch of other animation voice people. And you're gonna again, like I said earlier, hang out with people that do what you do. Hang out with some voice people, see where they work, see where they go, how do they get their jobs, you know, that's how you do that. That's right. And make it real. Have a reel?
Yes.
You have a reel where you are talking to yourself and all the different character voices, like you do scenes and things like that.
That's great, Kevin. And by the way, if we're trying to break into the comic book industry, draw and share your work. Just keep going like that. And I'm at jewishcartoon.com, Twitter, Facebook. Please take the address. I'm having a brain, rot right now where I can't think of comics, but I'd be happy to give you a list of 10 things. Calvin and Hobbes is an example. It's not comic books per se, but it's great for all ages. Yeah, it's a real inspiration.
And all over the internet, you can find me everywhere.
Right. And we are Butch and Gorf, and that's 3 o'clock club, and thank you very much for coming out.
What's my foundation do? My foundation is a conduit to other foundations. We help raise money for other foundations. So we kind of do a little bit of everything. But our main goal is to help. And so we find a legitimate cause that we feel is worthwhile. We do everything we can to help that out. So we basically just compile money to help people. We helped with the Hurricane Harvey thing recently. We support a homeless center in the Valley called Friends Homeless Center. We are supporting it's not an orphanage, it's a home for abused children in Texarkana, Arkansas, called Water Springs Ranch. They have this beautiful ranch where all these kids come and live there. And they have different homes. They have a home for like girls 3 to 7, and home for girls 7 to 14. each home has parents and like registered, okay, vetted parents that are there to raise them. It's a really great cause. So those are examples of things. Yeah, but wherever there's a cause, we'll be there to help. We've been doing it about 12 years. Yeah, so, yeah, it's really
Amazing.
cool. Thanks for asking about it.
Yeah.
Who gets this?
Oh,